Hello and welcome to Goto My Mentor channel. My name is Susanth Kurunthil. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been a software professional for close to 3 decades. And in this past, 28, 29 years, I've been building so many software products. And then what I'm doing of late is I'm trying to talk to and then I'm trying to mentor young software professionals, whoever is coming into the industry. I've been having a lot of discussions with these kind of guys. And so what I thought is that, or rather what I found out is that many of the guys who are trying to enter into the IT industry, they don't quite understand how the industry works, so there is a bit of lack of understanding. So I thought that I would do a video that will familiarize most of the young graduates or people who are in their penultimate semester or the final semester of their BTech or BE program, and who has an interest, an inclination to join the IT industry. So I thought that this is something which I could do so that people can get that kind of an overview of what is happening. So to start with, anybody who would be wanting to get into the IT industry, you should have a clear understanding of what the industry is about, so what are the kind of employers that are out there. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you that kind of an information. And then this is a very, very India specific content, and you might see a similarity in other countries as well, but so this is very, very India specific. So let's get started. But before we get started, so please subscribe to this channel so that you can get these kind of information on a regular basis. And when you subscribe, you will definitely see all the content that I'm going to put out there in this particular channel. So please subscribe. Okay, now let's get started. In general, the employers in the IT industry, so you can broadly categorize them into two, so you have the services companies and then you have the product companies. And then the services companies are all the guys that you know very well, so you have the Infosys, Wipro, Cognizant, HCL, Capgemini, and then these kind of organizations. When it comes to product companies, so the Microsofts, Googles, and then SAP, Zoho. Okay, so what is the difference? Services companies are typically organizations who go to customers and then who understands their specific requirements and then build solutions for their particular needs. So these are guys who provide a service to their customers. Whereas product companies are the ones who understand what is the requirement out there in the market, and then they build products and then they sell that. As you can see, so you might be using Microsoft Word, Excel, or some of the Zoho products or SAP or some of the IBM products, and then these are products that they build and then they sell. Okay, so the primary difference between these organizations when it comes to employment is, the product companies, they have a plan, so they know exactly what they build, and they staff their team based on their roadmap and then their plans. Whereas services companies typically, especially on small services companies, they would really go to the market and then try to get a project, and based on the project, you will fill the team with the right resources. But these big companies, they definitely do have standard practices and stuff like that. So it may not be as black and white as I just mentioned, but in general, this is how so you distinguish them. Okay, and at the same time, say I'm not saying that these companies that have already listed in the services companies, so they also do have products, but they're primarily known as services companies, so that is what it is. So when you are joining a company, so just have a high level idea, is it a services company or is it a product company? Okay, so anyway, we will get into the specific details about each one of these companies, in detail. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, this is a lot of information. So if you look at organizations, or rather employers out there, initially we said that there are these two different division, services and products, but you can subdivide them into so many other categories. So if you really look at the services side, so there are Indian services companies and global services companies. The only difference here is that Indian services companies, I mean the companies who are headquartered in India, like the Infosys, Wipro, L&T, Infotech, and then those kind of companies. Whereas global services companies, you can look at the Capgemini's or the Accentures of the world. So they are headquartered somewhere else, and then they have a huge presence in India. But in general, the way they operate are very, very similar. And then there are a lot of other companies called the captive delivery centers. Captive delivery centers are IT organizations or the IT delivery centers of some large businesses out there. So there are a lot of banks and insurance companies who have set up their India development centers out there. So you have the Wells Fargo's, Bank of America, and then JP Morgan Chase, and then these kind of companies who are primarily set up their India centers out there to cater to their specific needs. So these are companies, so you can just look at them as services companies, but servicing very, very specific to their parent organizations only. So these are the so-called MNCs. And then the way they operate is slightly different from how the other services companies operate. And then you have a lot of smaller, what we call the niche services companies. And then obviously, there are these hardware design services companies and things like that. And then on the other side, so there are training companies, manpower companies, BPOs, and then, so IT departments of Indian businesses. So anyway, we will talk about all of these things in detail in the following slides. And then on the product side, you have the global MNC product companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and things like that. And then, you have the Indian product companies like the Inmobis or Zoho and these kind of organizations. Okay, so the way they operate are kind of similar. The only difference is, some of them are large multinationals versus some of them are Indian multinationals. Okay. Then comes the business startups. Business startups, these are the companies who run certain businesses, but purely based on IT. So if you really look at the Zomatos, the Paytms, or the Swiggis, they run specific businesses, say in the Indian market or in the outside India market. Their primary business is something else. Say for example, Zomato or Swiggy, their primary business is food delivery. Whereas if you look at the Flipkarts or the Ubers, their primary business is either e-commerce or say transportation. But these are very, very, very heavily driven by IT. So they do have a very strong IT presence, or rather, IT teams, who basically build all their backend. So the work in these kind of companies will be pretty challenging and interesting. So these are what we call the business startups. And then comes the technology startup. So these are companies who build certain technology solutions, and then they might be small. And so these are the companies, so who are the Indian startups who will be building products out there, and then they might be selling their technology products either in the India market or in the global market and things like that. And similarly, there are these hardware embedded software product companies. Okay, so this is in a nutshell how the employers in the IT landscape are. Okay, so now let's look at specifically at what these companies mean for guys who are trying to enter the IT industry. So let's look at services companies, whether it's Indian companies or global companies, the way they operate is very similar. But the only distinction that I make here is that whether they are a very large services company or a smaller services companies. Okay, so as I told you earlier, the Indian and then global, the only difference is that where their origins are. But other than that, these guys operate very similarly. And then these guys, as I told you, they work on projects, so they take projects from their customers, and then these projects can be one-off or it can be a long-running projects. And then there could be projects where you build something, build a solution for a customer, or you maintain a solution for a customer, or so you support. So there could be so many different kinds of services that you do, and typically. These kind of projects can come from any industry domain, and typically large services companies, they will have domain specific teams, so say Infosys or a Wipro may have a banking division or a insurance division or a retail division, and then these are the divisions who will run those kind of projects, or so they go and then take projects from these kind of industries. And also so they may even have many technology divisions also, so there could be teams that are doing only ERP, or maybe there are people who will be doing only SAP or only Oracle or only IBM, and then these kind of technology teams, so there could be many technologies, there can be a lot of horizontal technologies where so there can be projects like Java projects or .NET projects and things like that. These are typically called the horizontal technology projects, or vertical technologies like specific to a particular industry, say banking technology. Say for example, say Infosys has a product called Finacle, and then many projects could be part of implementing Finacle. So that could be a vertical. Similarly, there could be insurance or retail or any of those kind of specific vertical technologies. When I say vertical is industry specific, and then horizontal are these kind of technologies that cut across the industry domains. And mostly these companies work on a concept called billability. That means that, so when you are employed with this company, you will be, if you are put on a project, and then if you are getting billed to a customer, you are typically referred to as a billable resource. Okay. And if you are not part of a project and then you are not billable, you are considered to be sitting in the bench. So when you are in the bench, either you just sit idle, or you might be working for some internal projects, or you might be learning something and things like that. So there is this whole concept of billability that you need to understand. So when you are billable, obviously your employer will be happy, everything is fine. But if you're not billable, then you are an overhead for the company. And then if you continue to be in the bench, then that's may not be a great thing. But so there are many factors, so maybe your performance, maybe how the company is doing in general, how that particular say division or department is doing. There can be so many things, but you should have an understanding of what billability and what bench concepts are. Okay, so this is typically how large services companies operate. And if you're part of a project, sometimes so you might be extremely tied up, and sometimes so it may be part of a maintenance project or something like that, where you may be just billing 8 hours a day. So in that case, the workload really depends on the project. Sometimes it could be high, sometimes it could be low. Okay, so this is how typically the large services companies operate. And now moving on, if you're looking at the smaller services companies, there can be very small services companies to some medium level services companies. And then these are companies, who go and then take projects from anywhere, just like the big guys. But unlike the big guys, these guys may be a lot more stretched thin, because the number of resources may not be that high. And so they may have a limited set of technologies to work with. Say, for example, if there is a services company who only works on Java or .NET or something like that, they might take only those kind of projects. And they also work on the whole concept of billability. But the same, sometimes what happens is that if it's a smaller organization, then you might be shared among multiple projects, and then definitely the smaller services companies will try to avoid the bench as much as possible. So the number of resources will be smaller, and then your workload could be higher, and you might be contributing to multiple projects at the same time. But in general, the concepts are the same. And depending on the projects that you get into, you might have a lot of scope for learning, but sometimes you may not have too much of scope for learning. And sometimes, you may be doing some mundane kind of work as well. So, and this is not a general rule, but in practice, you can see that sometimes you might get some wonderful projects, sometimes you may not, and sometimes you may be cross-trained to some other technology. So depending upon how the market works, or how the sales process work, you may be going from project to project or technology to technology. So this is the nature of services companies. And then there is quite a bit of excitement in services companies, and some people really like it and some people may not like it. Okay, so that's basically what it is. And moving on to captive centers, as I told you earlier, captive centers cater to their parent company. So if you're an employee of the captive center for a US-based bank, then anything and everything that the bank wants will come here as a project, and then you will be part of a project. So typically you may not have the concept of bench or anything like that there. And then, so here you will have a steady stream of projects, and then, you'll be part of some project or the other at all the time. And then you'll be working with your counterparts in the head office, or, the other offices or other centers of the parent company. So there could be a lot of communication back and forth with teams that are sitting somewhere else. And all of these could be, or all of these will be, internal projects. And then the technologies that are used will be very specific to the company. And if that company is using XYZ technologies, that will be the only ones that you will be exposed to in these kind of centers. And mostly the tech decisions and most of those kind of decisions will be taken by the headquarters, So typically the CIO or the CTO and then those kind of people will be sitting out there in the HQ. And so you'll be basically following the instructions. But sometimes, so you will definitely get a lot of insights into how that particular industry works. So in IT in general, the industry domain expertise is considered to be a very, very great thing. So if you happen to be looking for those kind of exposure, you should be definitely looking at the captive centers. And then typically captive centers are, they are decent paymasters. So this would be a very, very good option for you if you are looking at the vertical specific learning and some decent pay. Okay, so moving forward, then there is this other type of companies called the niche services companies. So these are very interesting, because these are companies who work on specific technologies. Say, for example, there could be a services company whose only business is to implement SAP solutions or Oracle solutions or Salesforce solutions or some of the RPA solutions like UiPath and stuff like that. So these are guys who will only be working on those kind of technologies, and then they will be going and then getting those kind of projects, and then you will be exposed to those stuff. And these are typically skills that are referred to as premium skills, So sometimes it might be very difficult for you to attain those kind of skills in the general market, especially, if you're really looking at some of the specific IBM technologies or some of the Oracle technologies and stuff like that. Those kind of software is very difficult to come by, and then, you will find it very difficult to get trained on the general market. Okay. So these kind of premium or the niche services companies, they have an edge because there will be a lot of requirement for those kind of skills, and then you can definitely look for a premium. So one of the companies, or rather two of the companies that I was running prior to my current organization, so they were niche services companies. We were working on a technology called the IBM FileNet, and then so getting trained on these kind of technologies were very, very difficult. It was very expensive, and then people with skills on those kind of technologies are kind of rare, and then they are very high in demand. Okay, and then with these kind of niche companies, one of the good things is that there'll be a lot of customer facing opportunities, and also there'll be prospects for travel. Yeah, especially this was true in a pre-COVID area, but we will have to see how it will pan out in the long run. But if you happen to be looking at a niche services company, you can definitely learn and earn quite a bit. Okay. So then product companies, Indian or global, anytime you are in a product company, your potential to learn will be very high. And especially if you are in a global product company, your potential to earn will also be pretty good. And then these are guys, who will work on specific products. Say, for example, if you are with Microsoft or AWS or stuff like that, or Google, then, they're considered to be the premium employers, just because of their brand and then the kind of work that they do and things like that. And then typically these are the guys who are always innovating. And as I told you earlier, so these are guys who have a plan, they go by a plan, and so they have regular release cycles and stuff like that. So if you happen to be part of one of those product lines, then obviously, you will learn a lot. And yeah, as I told you, they have very clear roadmaps and processes, and you have very good growth prospects. But the problem is getting into these companies can be very difficult because very, very competitive. Getting into a Microsoft or a Google, you will have to go through quite a bit of screening processes, and then everybody would want to get into these kind of companies. That's the positive things about all of these great companies. But at the same time, don't think that everything will be hunky dory, because so I've known so many people, who are in one of these companies, but they're not doing that great work, because everybody has a laundry to do, and then somebody has to do it. And then if you happen to be that person, then, you will not be doing something which is very innovative. And, but the thing is that if you put in the right effort, if you have the right attitude, if you can learn well, and then there is always a potential. But if you are a little slacking here and there, you might not be finding it very easy to cope with the work pressure there. Okay, obviously, work pressure will be very high in these kind of companies. Okay. So then we are talking about the new age businesses. I was talking about the Byju's, Ola, Uber, Zomato, Swiggy kind of companies. Their primary business is to run what they do, so either an education or a transport or food delivery, whatever it is. But they are fully technology driven, and then the kind of technology they build will be very high. And also getting into these kind of companies again could be very difficult. They will have a huge or rather very complex hiring process, and they will have a very high work pressure. But at least in the initial days of your career, you would definitely enjoy these kind of things. There's going to be a lot of real-time delivery, the time pressure, and then the work pressure will be very, very, very high, but you might really like it. Your potential to learn and earn will be pretty good in these kind of companies. Okay. Now comes to startups. Somehow, this is my favorite. Startups, especially technology startups, they will give you the highest learning potential, irrespective of all the, or rather, so we talked about so many different kind of companies. And then the bigger the company, the bigger the process, bigger the bureaucratic setup there. But, if you have a startup, if you have a small startup, you will have a lot of learning potential. Okay. And then the work pressure will be extreme, but you will know everything. Say if your company is building a product, you will learn exactly what is going on. And then, you will learn quite a bit from everybody around. And then, your overall development as a software professional will be very high when, if you are joining a startup. But at the same time, these kind of startups may not be the best payers, so you may not be getting, enough money, but the future prospect or, so the learning potential and then, your overall development potential will be very, very, very high. And obviously, as I was telling, I've been leaning towards it because currently I run one of these technology startups. And so when we bring in new people, within about a month or so, they are extremely productive, so they know exactly what to do, and then they know which part of the product they're working on. And so they start contributing. And this is one of my favorites. If I were to start all over again, I would definitely go and then join a technology startup. Okay, so then there are others, so there are training companies. Training companies are companies who are providing training services to others, So in these kind of companies, if you happen to be in a training company and then, you are hired as a trainer, you will definitely learn quite a bit to train others. So that's a good thing, so you can always be on top of the technology domain and stuff like that. You can train a lot of people. If you have that inclination to train people, then this is a good option. And then there are BPOs, so companies who are processing many of the business transactions, and then they will have the technology division, and then so you will have to support them, you will have to make changes to their software and stuff like that. So that's another employment option. And then there will be IT departments of Indian businesses, so if there's an Indian bank or an Indian manufacturing company or insurance company and stuff like that, there'll be an IT department. And you will definitely have, positions over there. But there is one caution when it comes to IT departments of Indian businesses is, so typically most of the core work, or so the development, those kind of work are outsourced, and then you will end up typically with a lot of administration and then clerical kind of work. So if you have an option to join one of the core IT companies, I think that might be better in the long run for your career. And then the last one I want to talk about is the manpower companies. So there are a lot of manpower companies out there. So what these guys do is they hire you, and then they place you in some other company. They might place you in one of the services companies or one of the product companies and things like that. So these manpower companies are not really technology companies. The only thing that they do is they hire you, and then they process your salary, but you will be placed in one of these other companies. The good thing is that getting into those kind of companies is much more easier, but the other part is that you may not have that continuity. Sometimes you may be placed in one organization, and maybe 2 months later they may pull you and then put it into a different company. So you should definitely understand what kind of companies you are getting into. So the key here is that awareness, that understanding of which company you are going into. And there are two other kind of companies that I described here. These are the hardware design services companies, and then hardware or embedded products. But unfortunately, I'm not somebody who is well to talk about the hardware companies, because my expertise comes purely from the software side. But if you have, or rather if your inclination is to get into those kind of companies, you should definitely do your research and then go and understand what kind of work that these guys do. Okay, so the key to, or the key takeaway on this particular video is, how do you really approach this whole process? What I would say is that when you are applying for a job, you should know the kind of company that you are applying to. Don't just blindly apply to any company that you find on one of the job portals, or on the newspaper ads. Do a bit of research, so do a lot of research on exactly what these companies do, and identify, is it a product company, is it a services company, and understand their business. And also, if you are part of an interview, or so if you are called for an interview, then you need to ask questions. And most of the time, people like candidates who ask questions. If you don't ask questions, then the employer will only be evaluating you based on your tests or the interview questions that they ask. But if you ask them questions, then so they will understand your thought process. So you should ask questions about what the company does, and most of the time you should know that even before you go for the interview. But at least you can ask specifically, what are your customers, which are you selling in India or outside India, and stuff like that. And also, you have to have a very clear understanding of what kind of work that you are being interviewed for. Is it core development work, or is it support work, or is it so do you have the bench, and then how does this whole thing work? So you have to have a very, very, very clear understanding of what to expect if you are selected. Okay, and then these are things that you should ask in an interview. Okay, and you need to evaluate your employer, just like the employer evaluates you. You need to evaluate the employer also, because joining a company is a huge decision, so you're not doing, or rather, so the employer is not doing a favor to you by hiring you, so there is a give and take here. You are equally giving something back. You're practically giving your career back to them. So you should have a very, very clear understanding of what you're supposed to do, and then you need to make a decision whether this is the right place for you to start. Okay, so do the research, and understand the company and then understand the nature of work. And in all of these things, what I would say is that when you are starting your career, forget about the money part, because most people look at only the money. Say for example, if you have two offers in hand, one pays you this much and then the other pays say 100 rupees more or 1,000 rupees more. And typically people look at the one that is paying the higher amount. But you will have to make the decision not by the money, but by the kind of work that you do, the kind of company that you get into, and a lot of things like that. So typically people look at the money first, and then the company's brand first, and maybe the location after that. Okay. But what I would say is that forget about these things. Look at what you're going to learn. What exactly will be the kind of work that you do, because these are things that are going to help you in the long run. Surviving in the IT industry in the long run is not an easy thing. It's very, very, very difficult thing. So you need to start with the right employer when you are beginning your career. Okay. First, understand that you are starting a career and you're not just looking at it as a job, So look at it as a career, understand everything, get into the right company. Even if that right company pays you slightly less when you are starting, you can take that hit. Okay. So this is what I will have to tell you about the IT industry. So hopefully you would have gotten an understanding of how the various employers out there in the industry are placed. So if you like the content, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so that you will get notified when a new video comes out. I typically upload at least one video every week, and then what I talk about is career, especially in the IT industry. So everything and anything that you need to know about how to build your career, how to be successful in the IT career is something that I talk about in this particular channel. So please subscribe. Thank you very much.